Brian Green is Assistant Director of Campus Ethics at the Bill Center for Applied Ethics and adjunct lecturer in the School of Engineering at our university. He has an MA and PhD degrees in ethics and social theory from right here at GTU, and a BS in genetics from the University of California, Davis. His teaching and research interests focus on the ethics of technology, particularly the ethics of space exploration and use, the ethics of existential risk, and the ethics of transhumanism.
Thank you. All right, just a moment.
Presentation, you got?
Nice title.
All right. My presentation today is called The Technology of Holiness. So, kind of the tension that I want to raise today is about how should we be like God. The Bible obviously says humans are supposed to be like God in some way. Biblical revelation describes that. The snake tempts us with it. It's kind of this deep temptation that we have. We want to be that way. And yet in that way it was a particular disobedience from the snake. Leviticus has several chapters where there's a constant reiteration, be holy as God is holy. So what do these things mean though? What about God's power? Because power is also a theme. It's not just holiness. You shall know them by their fruits. This is something from Matthew. True prophets will produce good actions, and that presupposes sufficient power to produce those actions. Jesus tells his disciples to go and do likewise. That promotes imitation of his miracles. And there's a verse from John. Very truly, I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and in fact do greater works than these. I'm sorry that the screen's a little bit hard to see there, but I've tried to get some interesting pictures in there. All right, this one you can see better. There are dinosaurs getting on the ark. It's a joke, right? Anyway. Sorry. So this call to both holiness and power, I think, should intrigue us. When we're reading the Bible, or if a person is reading the Bible, you look at it and see a lot of this power, the source of the power is God, right? So the holy person will be able to share God's blessings with the world by utilizing this kind of holiness or power from God. Except there's an interesting thing, which is that God is described as an artificer or a technites, which is in both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. Jesus is described as a builder, the word being tektonos and tekton, and therefore we can imitate God's power not only through holiness, but also through science and technology. So here's an interesting question then. There seem to be two paths then to godliness. One of them is holiness and one of them is power. Holiness is a paradigm that's not detachable from biblical revelation in a lot of ways. I mean, if you're going to follow the Bible in terms of its revelation, and you're going to be holy in that way, then you're attached to it. The power paradigm, however, is detachable from revelation and has been detached in that way. All right. So, and if you look at some of the stories in the Bible, some of them extol the virtues of technological power and others clearly reject them. So, for example, when Adam and Eve were getting expelled from the Garden of Eden, they try to make shabby clothing out of leaves. God says, presumably that's not good enough, I'll give you some animal skins to wear. So that animal skin clothing is given directly to them from God. Noah's Ark, God commands Noah to make a giant technological artifact in order to save the world, which is kind of interesting. Grain storage in Genesis 41, that's the story of Joseph and the years of famine. And of course the temple itself is a massive technological artifact meant to house the holiness of God in that location. Now there are also some places where technology is portrayed as being ambivalent or obviously negative. So in Genesis chapter 4, there are several places where they talk about, they're going through the history of humankind. There's the development of farming, cities, metallurgy, And of course, there are bad things that are in there too. There seems to be some ambivalence that's associated with this technological development. The Tower of Babel, obviously a big negative thing. They're trying to compete with God, basically. We'll get up to heaven. And then, of course, any example of idolatry, you're creating something physical in order to supplant God with that. So it's definitely, there's also ambivalence and also some strong negativity towards those things. However, in Christian history, for most of Christian history, I think you can make a pretty strong argument that the Christian church has been very pro-technology or very technologically optimistic in terms of the medieval monks, for example, collecting lots of technology that they could find, preserving things from the ancient world, promoting technological growth, producing new technology, and also, of course, the consumption of technology. So you can't see it very well, but that's an inside of a cathedral there. Meant to contrast a little bit with the Tower of Babel. For some reason, the cathedrals weren't seen as being competitive with God because they're, maybe a type of a holy artifact in that way. The monasteries produce mills. They even have the very first instance of a tidal-powered water mill is something that was that monks in Ireland developed. They did a lot of earthworks, so kind of the first land reclamation projects in the Netherlands were run by the monasteries there. Cathedral pipe organs, obviously, are very large technological artifacts. The development of the scientific method, Gregor Mendel, Georges Lemaitre. The invention of hypertext is something that happened because of the corpus Thomisticum. The guy who was doing the indexing on that went to the president of IBM and said, hey, I think you can come up with a computerized way to make this work better for my indexing of the corpus Thomisticum. And they had an argument about whether it was possible, and the Jesuit, who was the guy in charge, won. And that's kind of how the idea of hypertext got started. So basically, technology was seen as being good. There was only one exception, which was weapons technology. You can go back to the year 1139 at the Second Lateran Council, and the council tries to ban the use of the crossbow. Now, they make an exception for it. You're not allowed to use crossbows on other Christians. You're only allowed to use them on outsiders. So that's kind of an interesting way to ban something. But the interesting thing about that is that this idea of banned weapons technology still exists. We have think of anything that's banned by international law, and there are examples of that with poison bullets going back to the 1600s. Blinding lasers are not allowed. Landmines, people have been trying to ban those for a long time. Biological weapons, and so on. Over the course of history, the church has expanded the more things that it's banned. Obviously, it didn't need to ban a lot of things in the past because they didn't exist, but as they appear, then the church has decided that there are some things that are worth restricting. So right now we're not living in that optimistic kind of world anymore. Right now we're facing unlimited technological development, increasingly free of ethical constraints, and increasingly risky. So what might we expect from this? So if you want to kind of divide things into good and evil, and if you're powerless or powerful, if you're good and you're powerless, that means great. You're good but you're weak. You create a better world, but you can't do it. If you're evil and weak, you would harm the world. But guess what? You're not powerful enough to do it. If you're good and powerful, then at the ultimate limit, that's kind of the ideal of God, right? Omnipotent, omnibenevolent, and all those good things. And if you're evil and powerful, at its limit, that's getting kind of satanic. It's a power that's so evil that it would try to destroy itself. Now, of course, that's overly simplistic. You need to add middle categories. So you still have good and weak, evil and weak, and then kind of godly down here, and then self-destruction over here. But you end up with this kind of ambivalent good and bad, but you're weak. In this middle category, you're capable of some good actions, capable of some major actions of good and evil, and capable of major evil actions. Of course, down here, you could go either way. You could either be very holy, or you could end up being extremely self-destructive. So I think over the course of history, through technology, we have been progressing down this chart. I think everybody can agree that we're not in this category over here. And we're not in this category, at least we're not down here yet, because we haven't destroyed ourselves yet. And of course we are capable of some good things. So somehow we're not in this weak category anymore. We're either in one of these two here. We're capable of major actions of good and evil, and we're actually even capable of self-destruction. So if you want to say where we are, it's probably right here. All right. So prominent transhumanists are often also interested in global catastrophic and existential risk because they know that we stand between this godlikeness and destruction. But I would say that there's a lack of understanding of why And this why question, I think, goes straight back to this kind of biblical or theological foundation. There's a theological origin of the movement. They want to be like God, but in the wrong way. They're rushing towards power, forgotten the need for goodness. So if you're going to be like God and you just pursue the power aspect of it, you're going to end up destroying yourself. If you're going to be like God, but you're pursuing the holiness aspect of it, then hopefully that'll work. All right, so it looks good, but in your quest to imitate God without goodness, you're going to end up dead, which is basically what Genesis says in the story of the fruit. All right, thus we're suspended between the ultimate good and the ultimate evil. If you go to Deuteronomy chapter 30, one of my favorite verses, I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live. God clearly sets the choice out there. It says, you got two of them. Which one is it going to be? Technology, I think, can clearly help us to choose life. There's medical technology, which is pretty obvious. That's all about saving people. Communication technology is actually super important too. Transportation, sanitation, agriculture, electrical, electronic, computing, all those things are things that have greatly advanced our ability to preserve human life and to promote human well-being. What about transhuman technology, though? Technologies which instrumentalize human life for the sake of maximizing some lower value, I would say, are unethical. So, for example, if you're trying to maximize pleasure, or you're trying to maximize money or prestige or influence at the expense of human life, that's not the right way to do it. However, not all transhuman technology is that way. Insofar as those technologies enable humanity to reach towards its natural and supernatural goals in a morally proper manner, these technologies should be pursued. All right, and running away from technology doesn't work, it follows you. This is a picture of the Marshall Islands, which you really can't see. It's too bad. It's a beautiful picture. You have to trust me, it's a tropical island. Technology, it follows you. The Marshallese were out there by themselves for a long time, living quite happily, and then what happens? World War II happens. They have people, external powers, fight a huge struggle over their islands, and then afterwards, the United States uses them for nuclear testing. So there's not really a good way to get away from this stuff. All that we can try to do, since we can't run away from it, is try to guide it towards good and away from evil. Once again, going back to international weapons limitations, poison bullets, blinding lasers, biological weapons, a lot of those things have been banned. Lethal autonomous weapon systems are up for potential next treaty. People have talked about banning nuclear weapons, although people seem to love them too much. So who knows what will happen with that. But my question is, if we're talking about technology, is there some way that we can have a technology of holiness? For thousands of years, humans have practiced techniques to enhance their spiritual and moral lives. Can we use contemporary and future technology to further that end as well? Have we tried? And so my questions are things, very abstract questions, I guess I would say. What is the purpose of technology in the world? How do we know when we're using technology for good? Can technology help us to achieve holiness? And that's that. Thank you. Sorry, I went kind of fast. If you need me to go back to something, let me know.
Well, thank you first for very interesting comments. Actually, as you were talking, I was thinking about something that I spoke last night about, and that's Soloveitchik. The essay by Soloveitchik. Soloveitchik is a modern Orthodox, very important Jewish philosopher. In my view, he offers us philosophy of technology. And he too kind of looks at the dynamics or the tension, what he calls between majesty and humility, which is kind of what you are proposing in the dichotomy between power and holiness. So for him, majesty is on the power side, and the challenge for him is how can human beings really not be oversaturated with their self-importance and with their self-empowerment and so forth. And to him, the only answer is the covenantal position. And when you are in a covenantal relationship, then it's not about power, and it's definitely not about technology. So, and he works basically he writes a commentary on Genesis and tries to work out all those issues. But where does it leave us? I actually don't believe that you can do technology of holiness unless you use the word technology more metaphorically or more kind of, loosely. So I'm not sure where this can be done. I also don't believe that the transhumanist discourse, as I understand it, or as I read it, is interested in holiness. It's almost like selling them something they're not going to buy. Right? They could care less about that category. They do care a lot about risk. Nick Bostrom has written a lot about risk assessment. And actually, I think that this business with risk assessment is, to me, another sign of their hubris. Do you really figure that you can figure out what risk is? I mean, what will happen if the stock market, for example, drops tomorrow by, 500 points? Can we really figure out that in advance? I don't think so. Can we control it? I don't think so. So I think even the whole business that, yes, we are so smart that we can figure out risk, probably not. Probably not. So a lot of it is very speculative, it's very scientific, it's very impressive on some level. To me, it's not convincing, at least not on the existential level. So that's kind of how my angle on that. On technology and goodness, remains to be seen. I don't see that these people are particularly good people interested in goodness. I think that what there is in the transhumanist operation, transhumanist project, is a certain concern for suffering. They really do want to alleviate suffering on all sorts of ways. And I think in that sense, I can resonate with what they're doing. And there is a strong utopian impulse in what they're doing. But to say, listen, we've got the solution to all the problems and technology will get us out of suffering, that's misleading. That's naive, to say the least. And that's definitely not, it's not realistic. So I just don't buy that. In other words, I think that where you ended, I'm 100% with you, it is about choosing life. I don't think that what they're offering us is life. They're offering something which, in a sense, will be something other than life, which goes to your point. You were suggesting that maybe I'm wrong by saying, but by missing the fact that they really want us to live next to each other. That the super intelligent and the non-intelligent or under-intelligent or unenhanced, entity will live next to each other. Again, I don't believe that that's what's going to happen. I think that what eventually will happen, and we are getting there, is that one will replace the other. It's not going to be about coexistence. It's going to be about replacement. And just to share a frustration that I have, each time if I have to call the phone company and talk to another automated system, I go nuts when that happens to me. And I'm saying, give me a human being. I want to talk to a human being that can really solve my problem. So this is just a very funny way of talking about it. I don't think that their ultimate vision is about life. I wish it were. So I think that the Deuteronomic position is absolutely right. B'chavta b'chaim, yes, that's what it should be about. You should choose life. But life in this world, in an embodied way, in a political way, in a social way, in an ethical way, all of that stuff is irrelevant to the transhumanist conversation. Because it's a fantasy. It's a big, big fantasy about living without bodies, without society, without families, without all those things that we take for granted in family. And that's why I think it's problematic. I agree with you that we cannot run away from technology. It's ubiquitous, and that's it. That's our curse. Right now, it's our curse. Can we make it better? I hope so. I don't believe that. I would like it, but I don't believe that's the direction we're going. I think that more and more and more it will become so pernicious, and every aspect of life will be it's already determined by technology, but it's going to become much more invasive. In case you missed it, today, what's his name? Zuckerberg, okay? Today told us that in our current age, it's mistaken to talk about privacy. There's no more privacy. Or privacy cannot be perfect, that's the way he put it. Privacy cannot be perfect. Okay, so what are we supposed to do with that statement? Okay, so if you ask me what it's really about, I think what it's really about is capitalism. What it's really about is money and wealth and exploiting the resources. There are tons of resources in this operation. And these are the people who are going to benefit. It's the Peter Thiels of the world, not us. So they're not going to be, I don't believe they're going to make people better, nicer, more interested in coexistence, more able to live with diversity and with, that's not where it's going. It's really not where it's going. So I am a lot less maybe optimistic than you are. And that's why I find it misguided. I could have used other terms. It could be flawed. I could call it flawed vision of transhumanism or pernicious view of transhumanism. So misguided is actually kind of a, understated. But I really believe that this is a story that is moving us from the wrong problems of the world. The world has serious problems. We're not dealing with the problems. We're not dealing with all the real issues that we should be dealing with because we're spending all our time and our energy and our resources on this. As if technology will solve it. It's not going to solve it. So that's my kind of pessimistic ending in response.